So what do you need to do to get started? It's very simple. The Worklight Development Studio is actually a free license from IBM. You do have to pay licenses for the servers and when you're distributing applications, but to get started and do the kind of things you'll see me do today is actually all free licenses. You can go to eclipse.org to their download site and download the most recent version of Eclipse IDE for Java EE developers. You can also go back a version too, so if you already have an Eclipse environment, you can actually put Worklight probably on top of what you're already running. From there, within Eclipse, you can go to the Eclipse Marketplace and just do a search for Worklight, and you'll find the IBM Worklight Developer Edition, and you can just install it right there in the Marketplace without any additional work on your side. And then finally, depending on which devices you're working, you'll want to install the Android SDK, with the Apple machine. What you actually do is install their Xcode service, and that'll allow you to do coding on iOS devices. You do need a Mac machine for that, so this is a good time if you're trying to talk your boss into getting to a Mac. Now it's time to tell them, hey, I've got to do mobile development. I need a Mac now, right? And really, that's it. After that, you're done and you're ready to go. So let's switch from doing slides and start doing an actual demo. So what I'm going to do now is I'll switch over to Eclipse for you. So this is the Worklight environment. It's a standard Eclipse environment. Again, anybody who's used to coding in this will be familiar with the pieces here. What you have in the center is your coding environment. With Worklight, they actually give you a design capability. So you see here where I see my page code as well as a preview of what my page might look like. As a developer, I can switch to just a source code view or even just a design view, depending on how I want to see my application. I then have tools such as the Project Explorer on the left side that lets me get to the different tools in my different files in my project. There's various outlines and other property managers that allow me to fill out things. And then on the side, you see here there's a palette, so HTML tags, HTML4 tags, etc. I have the ability to easily add those to my project. Over here on the side, we actually see an example from one of the developer Worklight tutorials that goes through, and so you can actually see here it's got my application. They call this one My Assurance. So you have the common code. So within Worklight, you have common Android, iPhone, anything else you've added as an environment to your project. You have those things. So most of your code would go in the common directory, and that's code that runs across all platforms. So part of what we're doing here is a hybrid environment. So we actually have under some of these, like iPhone, I actually have native code that I can plug into. But in most cases, I really want to do code in one place and have that be distributed to the different devices, and I can use things like PhoneGap to tie into their native interfaces without having to code something special for each one. So let's go figure out what we're going to do to develop a new project. Okay, so I'll create a name for my project. I give it the name Demo, and then we'll go into our application, and we need to give it an application name, so we'll call it Demo. I can then add the various mobile components. I can do Jquery Mobile, and Jquery is separate from the Jquery itself. Jquery is built into Worklight already as part of the way that the Worklight components run, but there is a separate project under Jquery called Jquery Mobile that lets you do various other mobile components and things to add to your applications. And you can add it in here, or you can come in later and drop that JavaScript into your project. It's actually recommended you do it the other way. If you do the library, you'll tend to bring in all the Jquery demos and other things, but there is a quick, easy way to do it here. There's also Sencha Touch and Dojo, which you can add in. In this case, Dojo is included in Worklight already, and I just need to tell it to add it to my project so it knows it has that aspect to it. So for today's demo, what we're going to do is just do Dojo and create our project. So I'll click Finish to create my project, and this will take a second as it installs the Dojo and sets up my project for me. So we'll see this come out. So as it does, as I said, it installs Worklight. It does all that in my project. And here we go. It's pulling it up. So we see over here on the side, it's created me a project in the Project Explorer. Also, it's pulled up my application descriptor for the project. And this is an XML file that describes the display name. I can come in and put a description that I want to show on the Worklight console, such as we'll call it demo for the webinar, so you can put whatever you want to in this in the descriptions. There's also a Worklight server root URL, and this is where your application is going to talk back to the Worklight server to get an idea of what it wants to do. Get those components, check in with it. For your local development, you want to do this off of this local IP address and leave that the same. And then when you go to production or development, staging environments, you'll put that server in before you deploy the application so that it knows which server to go to. You can also, from here, once we add in other pieces, this application descriptor will include things for the other environments. So I'll save that change I did there. And then over here on the left, we're going to look at it. So you see it's created a project for me, and it's actually created other, it's created my common area. So just like we saw before, I have common, I have the demo HTML, but I don't have in here any of my other environments. Where's that iPhone? When we saw below in the apps for My Assurance, it had iPhone and Android and stuff on it, but I'm not seeing that in my demos. So what I'm actually going to do next is I can do this from the Worklight menu or from here. I can come and say New, and then I have choices. So I can come in and say I want new Worklight environments. I want to think about what do I want to add to my product. What devices do I want to support? So you can see here I can actually come in and say, okay, well, I want to support the iPhone, maybe the iPad, Android, and then I can also choose BlackBerry, Windows, or even do a Adobe Air, Mac dashboard, or other web-based components off of the same code base. So for today, we're just going to do iPhone, iPad, and Android phones as part of our example. So that'll set up, and you see here now I've got menus set up for Android, iPhone, et cetera. And these are similar to the common resources, but it actually gives me some native capabilities if I want to come in and do things that are specific to that phone or that device. One of the things you saw in here also that goes along with that is when I do new, I can also say application skin. So I can actually create other styles and things that are based on that device. And it may not just be whether or not it's Android or iPhone, but I can also say, well, I have a skin for an iPhone 4 and a separate skin for an iPhone 3 or an iPhone S, or when you get in the Android world, there's a whole different set of devices. I think there's something like 300 different devices released every year, and I may well need my application to show differently depending on the resolution of that device or the manufacturer. There may be certain features I want to surface or hide based on that, and so I can use that skin to actually change that on the fly but not change my core application code. For today, we're mainly going to work in the common area. So I'll go down here to my demo. So now I've got my other pieces set up. I can open up my demo file. And this is Worklight's actually mad because I haven't started the program yet. But you can see here on skins, I can come in here and choose like which device do I want it to be. You can see all the default ones there. But I can, you can actually add new ones and define your own as well. And of course, IBM does continue to update Worklight, so there's new ones, as they come out. There's a new iPhone announcement coming up shortly, things like that. We'll be able to add those into here very easily. So what we're going to do is start building an app. Right now, it just says demo. That's not very exciting. What we want to do is start building it. So I'm actually going to, well, let me show you a little bit about what we got here. You'll notice on the side, I can go in, I can put in HTML tags if I want to. I see my my code in the middle, so it's a fairly simple HTML file right now, and it's actually split between a design mode and my source code. I can choose to view one of those directly, so if I just want to work with my source, I can work with that text, or I can also do design. So with that design, what we can do is go in and add things. So I'm actually going to go down here. I've got HTML tags, HTML form tags. I want to use some of these Dojo things, so we'll collapse a few of these so we can see them better. And you see from the Dojo Mobile, there's all sorts of options I have here. And we're actually going to scroll down, because I'm going to start off by saying, well, let's add a tab bar to our application. And I'm actually just going to drag this over. For the first one, I'm going to drop it in here so that it starts it in the right place in my code. And you'll see here Worklight is actually going and building out that code to add in a tab bar for me. At this point, I might want to come in and say, okay, well, I don't need the word demo anymore, and clean that up a little bit. And now I have a tab bar with one button on it, so it has a tab bar button. And I can go change that, so maybe we'll call this our home button. And then I want to say, well, where does that home go to? So I actually have choices here where I can say insert things after or link to mobile. So what I'll do is actually create a few more. So it's going to generate this for me. I could also have dragged this over. As we see here, the toolbar buttons, I can drag those components over from my widget library. So I can go in here. Maybe we're going to talk about, this will be services, and then we'll add one more. Let's see, we'll drag one in for this one. So what I'm going to do is add one more. So we'll have 3 tabs in that interface. And again, that was a toolbar button, so I grabbed the wrong one. And in fact, when I compile it, it would yell at me about that. So let's see if it'll let me do this. Where'd it go? I'll add one more here. And this one we'll call about me, or about us. So now I have 3 tabs up at the top. They don't really do much yet because I don't have them connected to anything. I really need to show somewhere to do them. So with Dojo, what we do is we go down here to the bottom, and there's various other ones we'll see in here, such as swap view, etc. I'm just going to use a regular view, and I can drag this in and say, all right, I want this after my tab bar. And we can decide what we want to name it. So this one will be home, and it's going to be our default view, and we'll give it a heading so we know who it is. So that one will be called home. And these are all just standard Dojo pieces. There's actually tons of examples out there if you want to go look at all the way that you can use these different components. I'm not going to go too far into Dojo today, more just to show you how Worklight can work with that. So you see here now it's added me a view down here in the code base. It's got home, it's got label. I can come in here and put text or whatever web, basically it's like a web page at this point with HTML5, so I can go put in web controls or just text or whatever. Here we're going to keep it simple. So we'll say welcome to our demo, and then I want to grab a few more views so I can come in and drop another one in there. This one's going to be our services. It's not the default. We do want to have a heading. We'll call this one services. And for this one, we can throw in a back button. So you see here for some of the things in Dojo, Worklight actually already knows about these and lets me finish these off. I can always, as a developer, once you get used to this as a developer, you usually will sit there and just cut and paste and move the code around quickly without needing to do that piece. And then we need one more view for our about, so we'll drop that in. So here we have 3 views in here, but from the Dojo standpoint, they're actually not going anywhere yet. So I have these buttons, they're not working, so I'm actually going to go say, okay, I want to add these. I can go to my button, say button, what do I want to do? I want to link it to a mobile view. And so I can actually say, okay, that home button is going to go to home, and I can actually go tell it other things such as other page fragments. I can even change what effects it uses. So when I say preview transition, it'll actually save the page and kind of show me how that works. And it didn't like me doing that. Okay, and then next is, we'll link this next one to a mobile view. So this one was my services. It needs to go to services, so we'll just wrap these 2 up real quick. And then now we have a basic application. So you saw right here real quick, I was able to drag and drop the Dojo in, bring that in, actually get a preview of what that looks like. I can even change up here and say, well, what would this look like if it, say, it was on a an Android device? Is there a difference in what the Dojo look and feel is? And of course, behind the scenes, I can have CSS and other styles to manage what this looks like. And if I had other skins, I could choose them here. So all that's still, so far we've just done some web development, right? So what you're here for is to see Worklight. So I'm going to go back over to my project over here, and on my demo I'm going to say, hey, I want you to go run as and build all and deploy. So what this is going to go do is it's actually going to compile my app together, distribute these common resources into the various native pieces like the iPhone, iPad, Android, and go build my application. So you'll see on the bottom there, we actually see the server console as it's coming up. So there's actually an embedded Worklight server within the Studio tool. In just a second, that will be deployed. So now it's deployed. I say deployed successfully in all environments. And I'm actually going to now share with you my browser page. And we'll refresh this. This is actually showing one we'll see at the end, a demo app that Prolific has created. But you'll see in here with the app, here's what our app is. I can actually see the different places it's deployed to, which version it is, how the authentication is. So I can actually do things like disable a version. I might have multiple versions out there supporting different sets of users, and I can actually disable that and say you have to get the next version, or it's okay to continue using the one you have. I can also, from an admin standpoint, lock the version. It doesn't really do much other than make it harder to update. And we'll go into how you load applications to a Worklight server in a little bit. But basically, this allows you to manage it from a web page very easily. And what you see down here, before I refresh this, are actually adapters that are running on the server that allow us to do things like authentication and such. So I'm going to refresh this page to pull up our app that we just built. So here's our demo app, and you can see it's got iPhone, iPad, Android, etc. So we can go click on one of these and view it. I can do it as common resources, or I can go say a particular one like a iPhone. One of the things, the tools that Worklight Studio provides you is this mobile browser simulator. So it'll take a second to load up, but what it's actually doing is bringing in a device. It's not the actual device. We're not running on the real device, but it is a simulation that lets us quickly test some of the capabilities. So I can come in here and say, okay, I've got my home. Do my tabs work? Yes. Okay. I've got a title problem there, right? I named two of them about. But I can easily, you can see I'm switching back between them. I can also do things like play with my device here. So I can rotate it to see if it looks different that way. And you can see over here on the side, I can actually go do things like change what my device resolutions are. I can go do things like trigger events, such as, okay, I just went offline, call started. If I want to actually, if I'm testing a camera piece, I can actually give it a sample image. I can tell it things like, oh, your battery just got wiped out or it got plugged in, so that'll trigger some basic events. And again, this is all running, this is really in the Cordova side of things, the PhoneGap piece. It's still running in a browser, so we're not running the real device, but it gives you, the developer, a quick way to kind of test something, and especially when I'm doing layout, I can quickly see where my application is. I can also come up here and say, okay, well, actually, I want to see this on a different, like I did in the within the Studio. I can go choose a different device and say, well, what would it look like there? You can even do these multiple devices at one time, so I can actually go do sort of a side-by-side comparison and see, where they're looking at. So it's a nice little tool we can use to quickly check where things are at. So going back to Worklight Studio, let me get you switched back to that. There we go. There we go. All right, so now we're back to Worklight Studio. As we saw, we had these different targets. One thing that's nice about this when I did the run is I can actually go say, okay, I want to see the iPhone version, and in my run as, I can actually do a preview. So I can even see that environment we just saw within Worklight. So this is actually going to run a preview version, but actually staying within the Studio. So that's a nice, basically pulls up that same mobile browser here, and I can play with it within that environment. So I kind of have the two options of how to do that. So as far as Worklight applications go, let me talk a little bit about some of these other pieces. So we saw a Worklight project. I'm actually going to start doing an adapter here. And from the adapter, I can choose which, each of these I can choose where it goes to. And part of this is that I can actually, within a Worklight project, I can actually have multiple Worklight applications, multiple adapters, whatever I need to do to put together the system that I'm designing. With the Worklight adapter, the three main types are a SQL adapter, and that's what it sounds like. That's an adapter that's already set up. It'll talk to the server and then use server-based connections to go to your database. So if I need to go do a SQL call, pull back data, format it, and lead it down to my application, I can use that adapter. I also have an HTTP adapter, which is basically a REST call adapter. So if I want to do basic standard REST API calls, I can do those calls. The data is typically sent back in a JSON data format, and then there's tools within Dojo and Cordova and Worklight that allow you to manage that data as it comes in. And then there's also a cast iron adapter. This is added in a Worklight 5 that lets us easily connect to IBM's cast iron appliance. And we didn't talk too much about that, but cast iron actually is a nice device that can be run either as a VM or as a cloud service or even a sort of a pizza box appliance for your data center, and allows you to very easily connect to back-end systems. The training on it is probably 2 or 3 hours, and you can have like a business analyst able to map fields from one system to another. On all of these, especially the cast iron, we can actually use that to trigger the push mechanisms on the Worklight server. So you may have a business event happen in your SOA, your BPM system on the back end, and say, hey, I need something to happen. It can send a push notification to Worklight. Worklight will use it. It has what's called a common push infrastructure that lets it talk to iPhone, Android, etc., and it'll work with those systems the right way so that it can go send out a notice to that user. So maybe there's something they need to approve, and we want to actually push a notice to their phone so that it pops up. They see it, they go into the application, review what they need to do, hit their approval, and now we're not waiting until they check their email later in the day. We can make things work much faster and easier that way. So that's basically I won't go through the whole thing, but here, I can go through and create adapters. Part of those adapters, like the HTTP adapter, you might actually do that for authentication as well, so I can actually tie into authentication. There are pieces within Worklight that set up to that, so we can hook into your LDAP or other authentication. So going through this common code a little bit, just to give you an idea here, as we talked about, we have iPads, iPhones. We saw the demo HTML. I can actually go in here and create, additional HTMLs. I've got messages, which is actually JSON code, so anything where I need to go to put together common data or resources from application, I can put those in that messages thing. I also have a standard initialization JavaScript, so I can go in and put in your common init code in here and stuff. One of the things you saw when we first started up, I was in the MySurance example, and I'll show you that at the end where that's located on the developer work site. But one of the things that's nice about it is you go in, and it's actually, if we open up its JavaScript, you'll see here actually has common init, but it also has things like register, it's push events, and it'll go in and do things. This is where we started. We'll see in the body there's actually an onload init, and what it actually will do, and it's a good tip for you, is to go look at that code from that example, because what it'll actually do is one of the things it adds is a server check for timeout. So when your application starts on the device, it's actually working as a Worklight application. So not only is it showing the screens you want to show, but it's also going to check back with its Worklight server and say, hey, do you have new versions of these files? Maybe there's a different version of the form or other data I want to push down, and it can actually pull that down. By default, it's going to time out and say, hey, I've had a problem, I can't connect to that server. And there's actually in this MySurance example a nice way to actually put in a timeout to say, well, you know what, I'm going to more switch to an offline mode if I can't find that server. Not worry about if I can't get resources, because I want to actually use that. I want to keep running for that end user. One of the nice things about the way that works by it asking for other HTML things is we can actually on the back end integrate with other systems too, and that might be something like Portal 8. One of the things they're working with the web experience developer you see called the Portlet Factory, the Web Experience Factory, it is actually going to be able to generate Worklight 5 compatible HTML5, so you can actually use your personalization and roles and such that are in Portal to deliver content based on the Portal rules to a Worklight application. And other areas of IBM are also working hard to do this. So even if you're not a developer and just focus on mobile, you definitely want to be paying attention to this area, because all things IBM Forms, WebSphere Commerce, all of them are looking at building essentially pre-built Worklight components that we can use to extend our applications and get all the functionality of those other systems and easily be able to customize it to what our end users or our customers need. Let's see what else we can talk about here. So we talked about the palette and the toolbar. So let's add something to our thing, because we don't have anything native going on in our application so far. So I'm going to add something simple that will show us that. And we'll come in here and say, let's see, why don't we just use a standard button. And we'll come in here and maybe put that on the About page. And it's wanting to yell at me about that, but that's okay. All right, so what I just added in was just some quick code. Of what it's doing is talking to the Cordova or the PhoneGap components that are built into Worklight. And what that is it's a JavaScript component that also knows how to talk to the native libraries of the devices. And IBM's actually heavily invested in this. They have a lot of people on the actual Apache Cordova team that are continuing to improve it and add to it. So it's not just that they went out and reached out and grabbed an open source thing and threw it in and hoped it would work. They're actually pushing the technology and helping make sure it's great for everybody. And of course, it's open source, so it's not, you get these extra tools for free, essentially. And so we have a button here. Oh, stop that. And I will put in, let's give it a name or something so the user knows to do it. So that didn't work. And bear with me just a second. I'm going to get a name here. So what we're doing here is just giving the button a name, so it'll show up when we click it. All right, I'm not sure why the design pane is mad at me for putting this in, so the demo guide's getting to me. So what I've done now is in our About Us page, we'll now have a button that says, click me. One thing we noticed when we were in here is that our heading, so label About Us, services, goes up here. Services actually didn't go to the right place. Let me just edit that. Link to, I want you to link to services. All right, and then the last one we need to do, same thing. I want to link you to About. So this way, we've fixed that little bug in our system and seen everything. So now we can go do this. We're actually going to go over here, and we'll do the same thing again, build all and deploy. Make sure we save our changes. And so that will go build it out on the server and get the server up and running. And then while that's building, you'll notice down here it's actually created a Android deployment, and I can actually go tell it, I want to run on Android. In the Eclipse environment, I'll actually have the ability to go look at Android manager, so I can see their SDK. I can actually see what devices I have running. So right now I have an Android 4.1.1. Let's make sure you guys can see this. Yeah. And I can actually go create other ones. So depending on which piece of the SDK in, I can go, I could say new, and I want it to be Android 2.2 or whichever versions of the Android SDK I had loaded. I can actually create a virtual device to run it on. So this guy is actually running, I believe. Yeah, it should still be running for me, so I'm going to leave that alone. And my service is now running, so I'm actually going to come up here. I have my Android piece, and I'm actually going to say, let's see, which one is it? Maybe it's this guy. So I want to run as an Android application. So if all goes well, it should actually be loading that Android piece and letting us see it. So let me find that emulator. And that's just loading up. Just a second, and I'll have it so you can see it. Where'd it go? And we'll have a slight pause here while WebEx decides it wants to see the Android piece. So with the areas, what you have is the ability to share. The ability to work with Android emulators, BlackBerry emulators. If you have a Macintosh, you can do iOS, and we'll see that in a minute. All right. So here we see the Android emulator running, and so now it's actually starting to do things for me. And I can go in here and find my demo and run the demo, and let's see if this works for me. And it doesn't appear to want to. So we'll swap back to Eclipse and show it to you the other way. So back in Eclipse, I'm going to just do build all and deploy. It should already be running, so that should be fairly fast. And then we'll switch over to Chrome where we were before. And the deployment has finished, so I can actually go in here and view it running on Android in my mobile simulator. This brings up our simulator. If we go to the About Us page, now I have a Click Me, and that actually, this is the browser version of it, but it actually did an Android level call to say I want to pop up a notification to that end user. So that's actually talking to that native device. It's not so easy to do anything here, but I could have loaded the camera or other capabilities there to test it and demonstrate it. So now let's talk about the iOS side of things. So we're going to switch back to Eclipse. If I'm running, if I want to do an iPhone or iPad development, I have these capabilities here, but unfortunately the way Apple does things, I can't actually plug in an SDK directly into Eclipse. So what we do with those is actually come in here and I'll say, when I say run as, I can actually say run as an Xcode project. And so this is actually going to load Xcode and build the project and push it into that for me. So we'll start that process off. And I can still see at the bottom a log of what's happening, so I'll know when that completes. And then this is for anybody who's getting into mobile development, this is a good way to tell IT that you really need to have a Mac, because the only way you can do this piece of it is if you actually have a Mac environment. This is the one thing you can't really do on a Windows environment. You can still do all the common code and do all the testing like we saw in the browser and publish to your Worklight server. You're just not going to be able to do the direct use of Xcode if you have any specific native things you need to do there, or if you want to actually deploy it to a device, you got to have that through your Xcode because you need to be able to sign it with Apple's IDs and such. All right, so it says deployed to environment, iPhone. It's almost there, success. All right, so I should now have an Xcode running, and I do, so we'll swap to that. So this is Xcode, and you can see it's got the project over here on the right, and then all the resources that Worklight has built for me, including itself. So it's plugged in the Worklight pieces that the iOS environment needs. You see here, there's our demo HTML and all that's in here. Up here at the top, the nice thing is I actually have within this iOS thing, I can actually choose where I want to do. If I had an iOS device, an iPhone or iPad plugged in, I could actually deploy the application to that phone as a test environment. I can also use these simulators. So we're going to come in and use an iPhone simulator. And so what that does, we selected that and we'll say run. And what it'll do is build this within the Objective-C environment and deploy it to that local simulator. So what I'll do here is share that to you when it comes up. So here you see the simulator version of the iPhone coming up, and it'll take a second as that starts up. So it loads the IBM part of it, and this is actually, when we're done, I'll push the home button. You can see it actually is a simulated iPhone environment. So here's our demo, same things. I can come in, I can switch between my different things. My little back button takes me back to home. You saw that little animation we had turned on there about me. Now when I do click me, I see a standard iOS alert. So you saw how that one alert from the Cordova thing is actually working on both devices, but it's integrated into the native capabilities of those phones. And again, this simulator is actually is acting like a full iPhone, so it's got Safari and things like that on there. And like that web browser capability, you can see up here, I can actually do similar things like come in and say, which version is it running? Do I want to rotate it? What does that affect my my application? I can do things like shake gestures, simulate different capabilities on it to see how my app may reply to that. And depending on your app, you may have features that tie into those, and you want to see if you respond properly to them. All right, so I'm going to come in here and stop that. And let's go back to Eclipse and talk a little bit more about how to unshare these to be able to show it to you. Let's see. All right, there we are. So in Eclipse, a few of the other things to note on the project side for your Worklight project. So you see we have our application, we have our capabilities for the different native devices and such, but there's also a ability to go up here and we see under Server Java, and I don't have anything in my application, but if we go to one of these other ones, that one doesn't either. Let's see, how about our one here? Okay, so under here in Server Java, I can actually go create Java classes. I can drag in a jar file, so I can put in resources that I need to be running on that Java server, whether it's Tomcat or WebSphere. On the back end, I can include those in my project, so it's one package. And that allows me to bring in, maybe I've got a third-party application on the back end that gives me a access jar that lets me do integration. I can bring that into my project and be able to deploy it as one piece when I put it out onto that Worklight server. So that's a nice capability to be able to keep your server and client code all in one place. The other thing that happens here is we saw the demo, and we see down here under the bin category is actually my application compiled as a WAR, so that's what gets put on the server, but I also have individual Worklight app files. And so all is what you would think it is all, and then individual Android, iPad, iPhone, etc. So what those are is that when I want to deploy the application, I can actually give those, maybe I have a server infrastructure group that says, we really don't want our developers going and just pushing things out to the server or dropping them on there. I can actually come in and put these in and set them up so that they can upload those files. And what that looks like, if we go back over here to the web browser. So what that looks like, you see up here where it has choose file, I can actually open up a file and go choose one of those files and bring it in and upload. So I might have a bug that's in just my iPhone version. So I want to upload a version 1.1 of iPhone, but keep the other ones at the same because I'm not ready to update them. I don't want those users to be notified of a new version yet, that sort of thing. So you do have that management up here. I can also do push notifications. Now our demo app doesn't have that, but it would actually show me what push notifications were set up, as well as it does some basic activity tracking to say, well, how many users have been hitting our application. So you see here today where we've been hitting it from different locations. It's actually tracking those users coming in. So you can get some basic usage of who's in my application and such. By default, it's guest, but you can actually lock down the console, so you have to log in and not let people just come change your apps however they want to. So for the next part, what I'm actually going to do is show you an app that Prolifics has built. So I'll show you what the end game might look like. So we'll swap back to our slides for a second so I can talk to you about that. So what Prolifics had is we had a client who is in the health industry, and we've changed the names here because some of their information wasn't public that we could put out, but they actually needed to go out and they wanted to reach out to their members and say, we need a better way than just sending you the cards. If you're like me, I have 3 kids, and our insurance company sent us 5 different cards. They all have the same information, but you have to have a different card for everybody that goes to the doctor. We're always trying to figure out, well, I need a different kind of doctor. Who do I find? And you're trying to go through their website or find out where it is. And what they said is, hey, we want to have a mobile app that makes it easy to track your ID cards, find your coverage options, find who your doctors are. And so what we've done is built them a app. It works alongside their portal. So they do have a portal which provides similar things as the mobile site, but they wanted to give something that people can have in their hands. Maybe you're at a hospital and they say, well, you can't use your data connection, but maybe you still want to pull out that ID card, so you want to have that offline capability. And one thing I didn't mention on the offline capabilities, Worklight will work in that mode. It does work as an offline if you want it to, including offline data. So it has an encrypted data store. So if you have, especially corporate data, or in this case like healthcare data that you want to have maintained on the device, but you want to keep it safe in case somebody were to get that device and try to hack into it, you can actually do that with Worklight, and all that infrastructure is provided to you by the Worklight tools. So I'm going to get this started up, and we'll take a look at it. And then, part of this, as part of our demo here, obviously I haven't been using a lot of graphics capabilities, but you can with Worklight, and again, because it's separated into different components, I can have a user designer come in and design things like the flow, how things work within the application. So they maybe focus on the graphics look and feel, maybe even getting into some of the Dojo and jQuery and all that in terms of how do I want this app to actually react with the users, while then your more Java developer type people can actually work on the back-end integration of those pieces, all working on the same project. All right, so we'll switch back to running this, and I'm actually going to try to get it going on my iPhone thing again. So in the back end here, I'm launching that Xcode again. And let's share that with you. All right, so we're now in here. Again, I'm going to run this on the iPhone simulator. So it's going and building that out for us. So here we see that that application, and it's actually got authentication because we don't want people just to get in to see somebody's healthcare data. We put this on the front, but you could make this have them log into certain areas of the application. You may have some pieces like the provider directory that anybody could look up, but then like their virtual ID card, you wouldn't want them to see, people to see that. So you can have authenticated areas and not of your application. And so in this one, I can actually come in, I can say, okay, what's my virtual ID card? So I can go in and see what that is, all the phone numbers you got to call, right? Provider directory. So I might have different providers through my, different types of doctors through my provider, and I want to find them. I need to find a dentist today. I can go in and look for those, do a search. We can even do connect to geolocation and find a map data for them based on that. You can also tie into, one of the reasons why you would want to make this a mobile is that while some web pages have some capabilities such as location and such, we can actually, tie into their phone and other capabilities. Maybe you want to give them the ability to put their dentist into their local contacts on their phone, et cetera. So there's reasons why you may want this to be more than just a website. And then this also comes in and says, okay, well, we've got coverage options. So, what choices do I have? Maybe I can actually, as a customer, change which plan I'm on, or at least find out what they are. And then, of course, they've added some health and wellness information. And then, we've all seen those cards where you've got all those things. It's nice to be able to provide those 1-800 numbers so somebody could call it easily and have a question about their plan. They can switch to the phone through the device. So that's just a quick thing of what some of this may look like once you've had the UX, the user design people come in and actually look at your app and see how it is. Really, you have many capabilities through Cordova and Dojo and all that. It doesn't have to be just a button-based interface. You can do really however you want to on your capability, and then utilizing the native code aspect of it, where you can actually hook in native libraries. You can even do things like we have one customer who's looking at doing inventory management within their warehouse, and they need to do actual barcode scanning, but they don't think the camera on the devices are going to be fast enough or accurate enough. So what they do is there's actually a scanner sleeve they can drop a phone into, which will give it full laser-based barcode scanning, but then we can hook that into a Worklight app, talk to the barcode scanner, get the scan results, and then pass it on through the back-end server with Worklight and cast iron and pass it back to their system, so that all of that's now integrated as one system and not a one-up, iOS or other device.